Trials are built on countless words, questions, objections, testimony, exhibits. But every trial has a moment that shifts the ground beneath the jury's feet. A moment so sharp, so clear, that nothing after it feels the same. For the Brown family, that moment came not from Cody's defiance, not from Robin's tears, not even from Christine or Janelle's quiet strength. It came from a single voice, unexpected yet undeniable. The jury had listened for days, accountants explaining transfers, counselors describing favoritism, children revealing emotional wounds. But the room changed when this witness took the stand. Pens stilled, eyes lifted. And as the testimony unfolded, the jury no longer looked at Cody with sympathy. They no longer leaned toward Robin's tears. Their focus shifted entirely. It was the testimony that cut through years of television edits, family spin, and public debates, a voice that painted a picture the jury could not unsee and would never forget. We reveal who this witness was and why their perspective carried a weight no one else in the courtroom could match. The bailiff called the name, and the courtroom shifted. This wasn't a financial expert, not a distant observer, not a fan or critic. It was someone who had lived inside the Browns' walls, someone who had seen what happened when the cameras shut off. Mindy Jessup, Robin Brown's nanny. For years, her name had lingered in fan debates, whispered in online forums. What does the nanny even do? Now the answer would come not in speculation, but in sworn testimony. Mindy walked to the stand, raised her hand, swore the oath, and sat down. She looked neither nervous nor triumphant, just steady. The jury leaned in. The prosecutor began simply. Miss Jessup, please describe your role in the Brown household. Mindy's voice was clear. I worked as a nanny for Cody and Robin. My responsibilities included childcare, errands, and managing parts of their household. And were you compensated for this role? Yes, my salary was $80,000 per year. A murmur rippled through the gallery, reporters scribbled. Jurors exchanged glances, and Christine and Janelle's attorneys let the number hang in the air. The prosecutor pressed further. During your time with the Browns, did you observe anything unusual regarding financial matters? Mindy hesitated briefly, then nodded. Yes, I became aware of an LLC, one that only Cody and Robin controlled. Christine and Janelle weren't included. The gallery gasped. Cody's jaw tensed. Robin's sobs grew louder. In that instant, the nanny, once a background figure, dismissed, even by fans, became the witness who could pull back the curtain from the inside. Mindy's testimony goes deeper, revealing the conversations she overheard, and why her words changed the jury's perception forever. The prosecutor leaned closer, their voice steady. Miss Jessup, during your employment, did you ever overhear conversations between Cody and Robin regarding the family's finances? Mindy nodded. Yes, many times. What did you hear? Her words came without hesitation. I heard Cody and Robin discuss making sure their household was always secure financially, emotionally, and otherwise. But when it came to Christine and Janelle, the phrase I heard more than once was, they'll have to make do. The room fell silent, the gallery murmured. Reporters scribbling furiously. The judge's gavel cracked once. Order, Mindy continued, her voice calm but firm. They talked about the family pot as if it was shared, but behind closed doors, I saw decisions that benefited one household above the others. Trips, tuition, purchases, and when Christine or Janelle asked questions, the answer was always the same, that there was nothing left. Christine blinked back tears, her attorney squeezing her arm. Janelle sat taller, her arms crossed, her face steady, but her eyes glistening. Mary looked down at her hands, her silence as heavy as stone. Across the aisle, Cody shifted angrily in his seat, whispering harshly to his attorney. Robin buried her face in a tissue, her sobs echoing through the chamber. The prosecutor let the words hang, then asked softly, And Miss Jessup, did it feel accidental or deliberate? Mindy's answer was simple. It was deliberate. The jury's pen scratched furiously. Eyes that once softened toward Cody now hardened. Sympathy that once leaned toward Robin's tears began to drain. It was the moment the trial turned. The defense strikes back, trying to discredit Mindy's testimony, but only managing to reveal more than they intended. The defense attorney rose, pacing slowly before the jury. Their voice was sharp, clipped, designed to rattle. "Miss Jessup, you were a nanny, not a financial planner, not a business manager. Isn't it true you were not involved in family financial decisions?" Mindy nodded once. "Correct, I was not part of financial decision-making," the attorney pressed. "Then how can you possibly know how the money was used, or why certain choices were made?" Mindy's gaze didn't falter. "Because I was there. I saw the accounts. I heard the conversations. I handled errands that included bank deposits, and I lived inside the household where those decisions were made." The jury scribbled. The attorney frowned, shifting tactics. "Isn't it true that you were paid generously for your work?" "Yes," Mindy replied calmly. "I was paid $80,000 a year. That fact doesn't change what I saw." The defense leaned in. "So you benefited from this system, didn't you? You were compensated well, and now you're here criticizing the very people who paid you." Mindy's expression hardened, her words measured but cutting. "I was compensated for my work, but that doesn't make the truth disappear. My salary didn't erase what I saw happening to Christine and Janelle. It didn't erase the favoritism, and it didn't erase the pain." The gallery buzzed. Christine dabbed her eyes. Janelle looked toward the jury, her lips pressed tight, her strength silent but visible. Across the aisle, Cody's face flushed red. Robin clutched his arm, whispering frantically through sobs. The defense attorney tried one last time. "Miss Jessup, isn't it possible that what you interpreted as favoritism was simply a misunderstanding? A family doing its best under difficult circumstances?" Mindy shook her head. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, and it was deliberate. The words landed like stone. The jury didn't look away from her. For the first time in the trial, the defense attorney seemed smaller, retreating back to their seat. The jury hears the receipts, the financial records that don't just support Mindy's words, but etch betrayal into the record forever. The prosecutor rose slowly, a thick binder in hand. "Your Honor, the state submits Exhibits G through M." The judge nodded. "So admitted." Screens flickered on, and the courtroom filled with numbers. Cold, hard, undeniable Exhibit G bank transfers, thousands of dollars pulled directly from the family pot and funneled into accounts, bearing only Cody and Robin's names. Dates circled, amounts highlighted. A pattern impossible to dismiss Exhibit H tax filings. The very LLC Mindy had described, quietly registered, quietly operated, none of the other wives listed anywhere in the paperwork. Exhibit I, personal checks, tuition for private schools, a family vacation to Disneyland, a jewelry purchase. Receipts that totaled tens of thousands, while Christine and Janelle were told. Again and again, there was nothing left. Exhibit J, handwritten notes, in Cody's own script circled twice. Loyalty equals security. No loyalty equals no support. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge's gavel cracked. Order. But the shock could not be contained. Christine covered her mouth, tears sliding down her cheeks. Janelle leaned forward, eyes locked on the evidence. Her face calm but fierce. Mary lowered her head, silent and unmoving. Cody's complexion paled, his fists clenched on the table. Robin sobbed harder, tissues shaking violently in her hands. The prosecutor turned to the jury, their voice cutting through the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, these are not rumors, these are not misinterpretations, these are receipts. Records that show the Browns' empire was not a family pot, but a funnel. And the ones left empty were Christine and Janelle." The jury scribbled, their pens racing. Mindy's testimony was no longer just her word. It was now etched into black and white, supported by paper that could not be denied. The testimony shifts from money to emotion, as witnesses describe the scars left by years of favoritism and conditional love. The prosecutor called the next witness, a family counselor who had worked with the Browns during the years. When cameras weren't rolling, the courtroom quieted as they raised their hand, swore the oath, and took the stand. "Can you describe the dynamics you observed within the Brown household?" the prosecutor asked. The counselor folded their hands. What I saw was an imbalance. When Christine voiced her loneliness, she was told she was jealous. When Janelle questioned finances, she was labeled ungrateful. Meanwhile, Robin's emotions were always validated, always prioritized. Over time, that created a system where some wives felt silenced, while others were protected. The jury scribbled, the gallery murmured. And what impact did this imbalance have? In my professional opinion, the counselor said firmly, it caused emotional harm. It undermined self-worth. It reinforced isolation. It taught the children that loyalty mattered more than love. A pattern that creates long-term scars. Christine wiped a tear, Janelle's lips pressed tightly together. Mary sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the floor. Across the aisle, Cody shook his head in anger, whispering sharply to his attorney. Robin's sobs grew louder, tissues piling in her lap. The defense rose for cross-examination, their tone sharp. Isn't it true that all families argue that conflict is normal? The counselor nodded. Conflict is normal, but this was not conflict. This was systemic, repeated, reinforced, and harmful. The word systemic hung in the air like a weight, not a misunderstanding, not a family quirk. A pattern. The jury's pens scratched faster. Sympathy shifted further. The testimony wasn't about numbers or bank accounts. It was about scars that don't show up on paper. Scars written in silence, in favoritism, in conditional love. The children take the stand, and their words bring the jury face with what it felt like to grow up inside the Browns' fractured empire. The bailiff called the next witness, and the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. This wasn't an accountant or a counselor. It was one of the Browns' own adult children. They walked to the stand, raised their hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. The jury leaned in, the gallery silent. The prosecutor's voice softened. Can you describe what it was like growing up in the Brown family? The child hesitated, their hands tightening in their lap. Then they spoke. We were told it was all about family, about unity. But it didn't feel that way. Some moms had support, others didn't. Even as kids, we knew who mattered more. If you agreed with Dad, life was easier. If you didn't, you were left out. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge's gavel cracked. Order. The prosecutor continued gently. What about finances? Did you notice differences there? Yes, my mom was told there wasn't money for school fees or activities. But then we'd see vacations, lessons, and new things for Robin's kids, we noticed. We just weren't allowed to talk about it. Christine pressed a tissue to her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Janelle nodded faintly, her lips trembling but proud. Mary lowered her gaze, her silence heavy as stone. Across the aisle, Cody clenched his jaw, his fists tight. Robin wept harder, her sobs echoing through the chamber. Another child testified later. Their words echoed the first. Love didn't feel unconditional. It felt like loyalty was the price you had to pay. If you weren't loyal, you were invisible. The jury scribbled furiously. For years, fans had wondered what the children really thought. In court, their voices gave the answer: painful, undeniable, unforgettable. The attorneys deliver their closing arguments, framing the Browns' legacy one final time before the jury makes its decision. The judge's gavel struck. We will now hear closing statements. The prosecution rose first, their voice calm but edged with certainty. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the evidence. You've seen the receipts. You've listened to the children. This case is not about faith. It is not about polygamy. It is not about marriage. It is about deception. Christine and Janelle were told to accept less, while others took more. They were silenced when they spoke, punished when they questioned. The evidence shows that financial impropriety occurred. The testimony shows emotional harm was real. The Browns' empire was never built on unity, it was built on control. And now, it is up to you to decide whether truth or deception defines their legacy. The prosecutor sat down. Christine and Janelle's eyes glistened with restrained tears, their posture strong. The defense rose next, pacing before the jury. Their voice was louder, sharper. What you've heard are stories shaped by bitterness and resentment. Families fight. Families struggle. Imperfections are not crimes. Mistakes are not fraud. Cody Brown is not a villain. He is a husband, a father, a man who tried to hold a complex family together under the relentless pressure of fame. Do not let resentment be mistaken for truth. Do not let pain be mistaken for evidence. They gestured toward Cody and Robin, then toward Christine and Janelle. This is not fraud, this is family. The defense returned to their table. Cody sat rigid, his jaw clenched. Robin sobbed quietly into her tissues. Christine and Janelle remained resolute. Mary stayed silent, her head lowered. The prosecution rose briefly for rebuttal, their voice cut like steel. Family is built on trust, and trust was broken. That is the truth. The jury sat still, their faces unreadable. The trial was no longer about lawyers or witnesses. It was now in their hands. The jury deliberates, and the Browns wait in silence for the verdict that will define their empire. The jury filed out of the courtroom, the heavy doors closing behind them with a final thud. For the first time in weeks, the room was empty of its most important voices. 12 strangers now carried the Browns' fate. Christine sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. Her face betrayed no triumph, only patience. The patience of a woman who had carried her truth for years and could wait a little longer. Janelle leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her calm composure unshaken. Whatever the jury decided, she knew she had spoken the truth. Mary scrolled her phone, her silence unchanged. Headlines already flashed. Jury deliberates in Brown v. Brown, but Mary offered no reaction, no commentary, no sound. Across the aisle, Cody couldn't stay still. He paced in short, sharp steps, his fists clenching and unclenching. His attorney whispered assurances, but Cody's fury burned too hot to hear them. Robin sat beside him, tissues trembling in her hands, her sobs never fully subsiding. Hers passed. Reporters speculated outside. Social media swirled with theories. Would it take days? Would the jury split? But the answer came faster than expected. After only a handful of hours, the bailiff re-entered the courtroom. The jury has reached a verdict. A hush fell. Everyone rose as the jurors filed back in, their expressions solemn, their eyes cast down. The foreperson held a folded piece of paper, the verdict form. The judge's voice rang out. Members of the jury, have you reached a unanimous verdict? Yes, Your Honor. The words tightened every chest in the room. Christine and Janelle leaned forward. Cody froze, his jaw tight. Robin's sobs grew sharper. Mary lowered her gaze further, her silence unbroken. The foreperson handed the paper to the judge. He unfolded it carefully, his face unreadable. The courtroom stopped breathing. The verdict is read, and with it, the Browns' empire is shattered forever. The judge unfolded the paper slowly, his voice calm, deliberate, and final. In the matter of Brown versus Brown. The gallery leaned forward, reporters' pens poised. Christine and Janelle's eyes locked on the bench. Cody's fists tightened, his jaw rigid. Robin clung to his arm, tissues trembling in her hands. Mary's gaze remained downcast, unreadable. The jury finds in favor of the plaintiffs. The words detonated like thunder. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. The gavel struck, demanding order. But the shock had already spread. The judge continued. We find that financial impropriety did occur. We find that emotional harm was inflicted. And we find that the allegations brought by Christine Brown and Janelle Brown are substantiated. Christine exhaled sharply, tears slipping down her cheeks. Not of sorrow, but of vindication. Janelle sat taller, her calm expression steady, her resolve etched across her face. Mary did not move. Her silence remained her shield. Across the aisle, Cody slumped back in his chair, his face pale, his posture broken. The patriarch who once commanded loyalty sat exposed, powerless. Robin's sobs grew louder, her tissues piled in her lap, but her tears could not soften the ink, now entered into record. The judge placed the paper aside. His voice carried through the chamber. The verdict is entered into record. Court is adjourned. The gavel cracked one final time, and just like that, it was over. The Browns' empire, built on loyalty, control, and illusion, collapsed into silence. Not the silence of family prayer, nor the silence of reality television cliffhangers, but the silence that follows when truth can no longer be denied. Outside, headlines erupted within minutes. The verdict that ended the Browns. Sister wives' legacy shattered in court. From television to testimony, the fall of Cody Brown. But inside, the Browns knew the truth. Their legacy was sealed. It wasn't a confessional interview or a season finale. It was the sound of a gavel, the words of a jury, and the silence that followed. Forever.